Get your stinking rat out. It's Late Night Large.
Hey everybody, we're on Capitol Hill for the latest episode of America's Dumbest Insurgents. We got a whole lot of asshats here waving Confederate flags and not wearing masks so they can be easily identified. Tonight's thrilling melee features an elected representative filming and identifying himself breaking into a federal building. The Don't Tread on Me woman trampled to death. Drunk Dennis Quaid with his feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Fascist Jamiroquai. The world's angriest and deadest soccer mom. Robbie Savage's American cousin posing for photos stealing Nancy Pelosi's lectern. And a special guest appearance from the guy who accidentally gave himself a heart attack by repeatedly tasering himself in the nuts. But wait, there's more. We'll also see the world's stupidest man throw his own fan club under a bus on advice from his legal team, hours after encouraging them to fight at Capitol Hill and refusing to send in the National Guard. You might remember the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, from such fiascos as booking a gardening centre for a press conference by mistake and blood, sweat and hair dye. Well, now he's under federal investigation for imploring trial by combat to the Capitol Hill mob. We really do have a great show for you tonight, guys, but for now it's back to Aaron and Mike in the studio. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lockdown Large. How we doing, Mike?
Yeah, better than some of those Muppets. Yeah. So, do we assume there might be a theme for part of this show?
I think I assume that, yeah.
Yeah. Got like a little hint from the opening there.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well,
so I mean, look, I don't know what to say other than let's just get into it.
Exactly, Mike. Now, I'm sure that there's probably one or two things that have happened in the UK this week, but nothing bigger than what, some might argue is the most consequential event in America since 9/11. Which happened just not long after we did last week's show. So I think it was Wednesday, wasn't it, that this happened? So for anyone who's been asleep...
What happened?
So for anyone who's been asleep in a cave and is only just recovering and literally the first news source they check is Late Night Large. First of all,
understandable.
Yeah, good taste. But yeah, last Wednesday, of course, there was... how to describe it? There was effectively an insurrection on Capitol Hill, which is the seat of American democracy. It's where I believe both houses sit, houses of representatives. And on that, why that day, you ask? Well, on that particular day, it was the day when the official retallying of the Electoral College votes happened, and they officially rubber stamp the incoming president-elect, i.e. Joe Biden. Now, we might have been given a clue as to the fact that this wasn't going to go entirely smoothly by the fact that the current sitting president has, up until this point, still never officially conceded that he lost the election, and not in a sort of, not in a way of I'm just not going to say it. It's literally continually saying that he won the election, it had been stolen, there were loads of fraud. Of course, he then launched over 60 lawsuits, almost all which were immediately thrown out, and the ones that were investigated, again, he lost. I think he may have got like a handful of votes his way that didn't affect the outcome. So that was the situation. And what we had, Mike, was, I mean, I remember it unfolding. It was just I think I was on Facebook, just not looking for anything in particular. And I saw something on the feed that was like live coverage of, I'd actually forgotten that it was the process to confirm Joe Biden. And it was saying live coverage of scenes at Capitol Hill or something. And immediately, obviously, I went onto a news website. Sorry, Mike, am I keeping you awake?
Sorry, long day. Long day.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So what effectively was happening, which I found out at the time, was a bunch of goons had somehow managed to get past what you would have imagined would have been immensely tight security around the building where all the representatives of the American government were gathering. And then there were all these. I think the thing that made it most baffling is the fact that these were not like professional militia guys, you know, in combat gear who just completely overwhelmed the security forces. A lot of them just looked like redneck dumbasses who just were there for like a piss up, and yet they'd managed to breach all this security. They ended up running all around the House of Representatives, stealing stuff, vandalizing stuff, and of course it then got a lot more serious, which is obviously part of everything we're going to discuss tonight. Mike, when did you first hear about shit kicking off in America? Do you remember?
No, I think like you, initially Facebook was the source, and that I think again like you, and I would desperately hope everyone else. You think, okay, I've seen something on it, but you take it with a pinch of salt, don't you? You don't just read. You don't just take what you read on Facebook as gospel. So you see something, you think, what? Hang on a minute. Okay, let me actually just check, because I don't trust you, Facebook. But
yeah, as an instruction to Trump supporters, we see something on Facebook and we think, oh, I'd better check a legitimate news site to check if this is actually real. Sorry, carry on, Mike.
Yeah. Trump says pigs can fly. That's it then. They can fly.
Share.
So look, see something come up. I don't know if it was some of those. I've got a few. I don't know why I've got them on there. Like the pages and stuff. You can not subscribe to it. You like them, and then you get like things come up, and some of them are just fucking poor. Some of the stories that churned out. I don't know why I haven't sacked off these pages a long time ago, but it's just crap. But so I see something on there, like yourself, and I looked at it and I thought, what is that? Is that real, or is this just some sort of clickbait, complete non-story?
Yeah,
because you see so many of those, don't you? Fucking. I would say more things that come up on my feed are actually that than legitimate stories now. Things that are actually real. It's all clickbait bullshit. So I looked at that and immediately I thought, no, this is, I don't know, someone's had an argument and then that's it. I just thought this isn't real. This isn't what they're making it out to be. So yeah, I forget which site I referenced. I might have just, to be honest, chucked it into Google and gone, and then and there it was. It was real. So initially, for me anyway, it was like, wow. I didn't really know what to think, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just a bit like, what? They haven't. They haven't actually done. That's not something that's happened. They haven't done it.
Yeah.
They haven't done it. So no, it didn't happen. And then I read another one. Fuck me, the fucking morons actually have done it. Brilliant.
They have.
And then after that, it was kind of like the shock kind of subsided, and I realised, well, actually, yeah, why not? Actually, what does fucking shock me anymore about especially when it comes to Americans, but so nothing really shocks me anymore. Despite the initial shock, I got over it quickly and kind of composed myself. And after that, it was kind of like, well, actually, it's not funny, but I was. It's one of those things that's funny when it's not happening to you.
Yeah, that's
But
probably the best way of putting it.
yeah. And then I was like, well, let's just fucking see what happens now.
It was, wasn't
that
it?
was-
It was like popcorn, kind of fucking hell, kind of what?
Yeah, it's that meme, isn't it, with Michael Jackson or whatever, just like sitting there eating
Oh yeah,
the popcorn. GIF.
it was. Yeah. So yeah, I think it was a combination, wasn't it? So when I was watching it, I think the shock, because initially you think the shock is I can't believe this is happening, and then when you analyze it, you think actually no, I can't believe this is happening because it was really obvious. What I can't believe is that they've been allowed to get this far. I think that was what I was shocked about. I mean, if you told me, oh yeah, you seen some Trump supporters have kicked off and rioted and stuff, well, yeah, because that's what Trump's been whipping them up to do. But when they said, they were in the building, like smashing stuff up and threatening people, I was like, what? Is there no such thing as armed security at these places?
Yeah, it did surprise me. Like I say, another Trump rally, right? That doesn't surprise anyone, does it? And a bunch of fucking inbred morons going around with some signs, then Trump won and whatever. Like, yeah, that's to be expected. But how? Yeah, not even now. I still think how. Yeah, how was that allowed to happen?
Okay, so the thing
there, I mean, you would, might you say, you'd have fucking armed guards. You'd have security there, like fucking shoot to kill. If ever,
well,
there was trying to endorse that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, on the subject, Mike, I'm going to say this straight off the bat because we're going to do a deep dive into all the little things I noticed about what had happened, and then we'll discuss that. But first of all, let me say something really obvious, and it's been said. I mean, to their credit, this has been said on almost all American major networks, other than the dipshit networks like Fox News, but on almost all American news networks, what they've all said, including Republican representatives as well, is they've said the biggest thing here is if this was Black Lives Matter or a fundamentalist Muslim protest or whatever, and they tried to even step foot on the steps of that building, there would be corpses piled in the street. It would be a bloodbath of security gunning them down. And to be fair, most news stations were repeating that sentiment. They were saying, like, and bear in mind, a lot of these stations are not particularly supportive of BLM or anything, but they'd seen it and they were completely disgusted, and they said, like, how can we continue to pretend that we are not really, really racist when you saw the treatment of Black Lives Matter, where you had, what the most militarized police presence ever on the steps of Capitol Hill when Black Lives Matter were marching peacefully through, because the black men are very, very scary, even though they clearly are saying stop brutalizing us, and they're not rioting. And then these white inbreds are charging into the building, like literally chanting that they want to kill the vice president. And anyway, we'll go into more detail of how they got in the building or whatever. But I thought that was telling that almost all American news networks did admit that this is white privilege in action. If they were black or Muslim, there would have been corpses in the street.
Yeah, to be fair, a lot of the stuff that I've seen on or from American media has been, and I know I said Americans earlier, but and we generalise, but because it's easy to, but nearly everything I've seen from over pond was just people were just distraught that their country had got to that, let alone the other connotations that we can draw from it, and like you say, if it was BLM protesters or whatever, but yeah, just distraught that their country had even got into that state.
Yeah.
But
I should say off the bat that we are obviously talking literally about the people involved in this. The vast majority of Americans saw exactly what this was about. Nobody in their right mind supports far right goons overriding and trying to overturn basically a coup, attempt a coup d'état on the government. So Mike, let me just deep dive into some of the details that we know about this. So
root deep. Go on, Sam.
root deep.
Go on, Sam.
I think it's an advantage that we're doing this now, because if this had happened the day we did Late Night Lives last week, there would have been no details. We'd have just been like speculating. So we've had chance for a lot of details to come out. So, you know, we said it was funny to laugh at some of these things, and it is, and we will laugh at them later because you have to at some things. But I mean, just in case anyone writes this off as, oh, it's a bunch of idiots causing a few problems, but you know, you calling it an insurrection or an attempted coup is not, you know, that's going too far. It wasn't that serious. And you're just like, somebody said it quite well, which was, just because the people who did it were really dumb and didn't really know what they were doing doesn't mean it wasn't a coup attempt. So just because they're stupid and they don't understand how, like, strategy or anything, does not mean that they didn't go in there with malicious intent. So to give you an example of what I'm talking, what I'm talking about. So I take it you heard about some of these, Mike. Pipe bombs and Molotov cocktails were found at Republican and Democratic Party headquarters. There was a guy who was pictured inside the mob, inside the Capitol building, with a bunch of zip ties, which is very worrying, suggesting that there was a plan to potentially take hostages. We'll talk about this later, but there were at least two very prominent Republican representatives, actual senators, who were blamed for inciting the mob, and then even after people were cleared out, continued to argue the complete fabrication that Trump might have won the election. So that was Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, who we'll talk about a bit later. There was a report. There was a report that was confirmed in more than one place that a gallows had been constructed outside the building, apparently for Mike Pence, the vice president. So this is how loony they are. Mike Pence is a Republican, but because they're so invested in the cult of Donald Trump, they see him as a traitor to the cause, and they wanted him hanged because he literally followed the Constitution of America, which they claim to be defending with their blood. So these people just, they don't have any kind of logic going on in their tiny little brains. So yeah, that was some of the more worrying things, Mike. And then, I mean, so then if we go into, obviously, other than those very worrying things that were found around the place, 5 people died, which obviously makes it a really serious incident. So out of the 5 people that died, what we know is one of them was a police officer. I think Brian Sicknick, I think his name was. So he was a police officer who died in the line of duty. And I remember reading that apparently he was battered to death with a fire extinguisher.
Fuck's sake.
And just to make clear how ridiculous the thinking of mobs has to do with this, is this guy who was killed in the line of duty was a massive Trump fan. They've killed someone who supported the same guy they did because they're so poisoned by these lies from him that they think that that's justified. So they murdered a police officer. There was a woman was executed by I think the Secret Service police or the Special Police. Did you see the recording? There was a recording going around. Yeah, so there was a guy who claimed to be a liberal who walked in with everyone and filmed everything, you know, basically for law enforcement. I don't know if that's entirely true, but he definitely gave the footage to the papers. And yeah, he was filming what happened with this woman. So this woman was, you saw a picture of earlier, Ashley Babbitt. And wouldn't you know it, as well as being a massive Trump fan and conspiracy theory believer, she was an Air Force veteran or Air Force Reserve. So she'd served in the US military. So again, just think the kind of twisted sense of logic in these people's heads, that they're so proud of their country that they'd serve it in the military, but then they'd be killed in the line of trying to overthrow the government and basically commit treason. So, yeah, this woman, Ashley Babbitt, in the video, you can see what's happened is there's a set of doors leading to obviously a very important building. I forget what it was, but the doors were barricaded. So there were chairs pushed against the door from the other side, and presumably they were also locked, and there were police standing directly in front of them, just, you know, like this, not moving. Meanwhile, and there's a set of stairs right in front of them, and the protesters are all thronging around the stairs. And this woman appears at some point and is being quite aggressive, as well as a couple of other people. There's one guy in front of her who was literally punching the glass with his bare fists either side of these coppers. You know, when someone like gets right in the face trying to be really, and he's like throwing punches just to the side of their head, breaking this glass with his bare hands. Just after that, like a couple of minutes after that, you hear a lot of noise, and then one of the police officers like looks down the stairs, and they basically get told to stand down. So the police officers move away from the door. And at first, you're a bit confused, like, is that really safe? Because almost immediately after they stand down, the protesters push forward, and this is when the glass that had been broken, it presented like an opening in the window of the door. But as soon as the officers moved away, almost exactly as soon as they moved away, you saw an arm moving out from behind the door, pointing a gun. And there was a few seconds where everyone was shouting, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun." So there was no, you know, it wasn't by surprise. Everyone could see that this guy was pointing a gun at the door. He'd obviously been told, don't let anyone cross this barrier. So the police officers stand away, people push forward, and then apparently what happened is a guy held his hand out to help this woman, like basically stand on his hand to help her through the gap in the window. So even though everyone had shouted, "He's got a gun," she and whoever was helping her completely ignored it. He tried to push her through, and then obviously as she was going through, she just gets shot, flies backwards. She ended up dying in hospital. So this secret police or whatever, Secret Service police, shot her to prevent her presumably breaching that barricade. So that was another death. And so this is where you have to go down the rabbit hole, Mike, because I've been looking at a few things connected to this, right? So I don't know if you heard about this, but after it all came out about this being Trump's fans doing, and these were all massive Trump fans who believed in all these conspiracy theories and thought the election was stolen, how do you think they reacted? They started blaming everyone else, didn't they? Oh, it was Antifa and it was Black Lives Matter protesters. They were just dressed up like Trump fans. They, you know, Antifa, who literally in the name oppose fascism, apparently they went to the trouble of getting shit tattoos and wearing anti-Semitic and Nazi regalia. That's how much they were committed to doing what? Like discrediting Trump by proxy. Like their logic is so like out in space. But you know, even people who are considered what you might call Republicans with credibility were throwing this bullshit around. Sarah Palin was spreading it around. Oh, I think it must have been Antifa. And okay, so here's where the funny part comes. So this woman that was killed, Ashley Babbitt, she was a massive Trump fan, completely way head underneath the conspiracy theory waterline. She was dementedly convinced about all these conspiracy theories. and she felt like she was fighting for her country, right? And then her family, of course, is like obviously mourning and then saying, you know, even though it's embarrassing because effectively what she did was she sacrificed herself for Trump, not her country, just Trump's lies. And yet her family are kind of like, oh, well, she believed what she believed. And do you know what reward she got for it, for fighting for Trump? A load of other Trump fans smeared her name online and said she was actually an Antifa member. So that's what you get for throwing yourself on the front line, getting gunned down on behalf of Donald Trump. Do you get any glory? No. What you'll actually get is the people who were on your side saying you were on the other side. So well done. You know, what a complete waste of your life you just made. Any comments, Mike?
I mean, you put it so succinctly. No, I think, listen. I think when you talk about someone losing their life,
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, you have to be, well, we don't have to be careful because we're late night large, lockdown large, and we'll do what the fuck we want. But, you know, there is, you know, you do maybe have to consider that actually this is a human being who's lost their life. And that's that said. But for fuck's sake, do you know what I mean? Like, there's how much sympathy can you have?
I would argue, Mike, don't get me wrong, the first point I'd make is after George Floyd's murder, people like her were then immediately saying he was a dirty criminal and he deserved what he got. I'm not saying at all that we should stoop to that kind of level of despicable rhetoric, but anyone who supports fascism, I'm afraid, I wouldn't give a shit if they lose their life, because fascism is where you believe that people that are not like you deserve to be herded into concentration camps or imprisoned or gassed. So if you believe in that ideology, your life effectively becomes worthless to other people. That's my personal judgment.
That's your personal opinion, and I don't think that mine is really too far removed from that. But I think that you know, if it doesn't, do you not think it feels bad? Like there's something that doesn't feel right about taking the piss out of someone losing their life. Yet still, it does feel right.
Yeah, no, I'm completely, yeah. But you know why it feels weird? It's because we have consciences and we have morals. You know, the bottom line is,
not too many people. Don't worry.
Yeah, sorry. we have certain moral standards. We you know, we believe in the sanctity of human life. Like,
yeah, threshold is very low, but it's there. It exists.
Yeah, we might joke about, you know, incest, you know, sexual assault and stuff like this. This is satire. You know, we do have some kind of moral standards. But no, this is why sometimes it feels a bit awkward laughing about it, because we do believe in the sanctity of human life. But the bottom line, do you know what the saddest thing I think about that death is? Like I say, I don't mourn the death of any fascist, but I think I feel pity. I feel a lot of pity with how brainwashed she was. To get to that stage, to sacrifice yourself for like pond life, like Donald Trump, who literally wouldn't have pissed on her if she's on fire, and she's given her life for his bullshit. I mean, if I were her family, I would absolutely hate Donald Trump, and I would, you know, run campaigns trying to let his, you know, acolytes know this guy is a complete cunt who's led to the death of so many people. But, you know, that's just...
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult though, isn't it? Like, imagine. Yeah, so okay, limited sympathy for, and she wasn't the only one that died, but limited sympathy for that woman, right?
Yeah.
imagine if you were a family, though. You mentioned it there. Imagine if you actually were her family. I wouldn't. If that was my sister, how do you
process it?
What do you even think about that? I don't know what family she has. She might have siblings. So she's guessing she's got parents, or maybe they're still with us or not. But I don't know. But how would you even begin to process that?
Yeah. Well, you think about it. Imagine saying that your daughter had served in the military. Which whatever we say about the military in America, that is something to be proud of. Almost everyone agrees. So
yeah, definitely.
Thinking it, ignoring, whether the ethics of the government when they use the military, etc. In America, it's a big thing. If you serve in the military, a lot of the places, you'll get free drinks, free meals. They consider you a hero. Imagine saying that you'd served, I don't know, 4 tours of duty or whatever. Oh, but she died. Oh, really? So what, in Afghanistan? No. Like, trying to overthrow the government? You mean she got killed for treason? And it's like, it must be so awkward for a family. I really feel for them. But yeah, so that was a very sad state of affairs of her situation. So going over some of the other, particularly the people who died. So I know you're looking forward to me talking about this, Mike, and I give us permission to laugh. So
I already am.
Yeah. So the guy that you saw earlier, who was posing in his house with an assault rifle in each hand and 2 pistols pointed at his nuts. Now, you could argue that photo was a premonition of his eventual demise. So clearly, the guy doesn't think too much about safety by pointing 2 pistols towards his genitals. And of course, that's how it worked out, because he had an even more ignominious death, Mike. He was in the middle of stealing a painting from inside the Capitol building when and I think this is his own family who confirmed this, when he accidentally discharged the taser that was inside his pants, that then zapped him in the testicles multiple times until he had a cardiac arrest. I mean, where do you even begin with that? Your face says it all.
It's not, again, a man lost his life, and that is, but I mean, and I know it might be a bit soon, but I mean, what a way to go.
Do you know the thing I find about him, Mike, though, is we've gone through this before, the Darwin Awards. Now what I find most funny about it is so here we go. What I find really funny, there's 3 really funny aspects to this. So number 1 is you can say he died doing what he loved. So that's number 1. Number 2, you could say he kind of earned it because he was stealing property from a federal building. So he earned some kind of karmic retribution. And number 3, of course, is the Darwinism comes in, because who's fucking stupid enough to put a taser right next to their nads? So there you go.
Look, I mean, the only, I don't know. You've got to say that these people, although clearly very dumb, they must have really and genuinely believed in what they were doing. And don't get me wrong, I imagine there were some, potentially like that guy, but we don't know. But some that probably just went along for the ride.
Definitely, yeah.
But the majority, at least, would have genuinely believed with all their hearts and all their tiny little minds that they were right, and their actions were just, and actually that what they were doing would be looked back on one day as, you know, acts of heroism. You know, they were the people that saved America, or, you know, that's they must believe that.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways of looking at that, though, isn't it, Mike? One of them is they genuinely believe they were doing the best thing to save their country, but then the other way of looking at it is it not an extended narcissism? I'm a hero. Look at me. So it depends which side of those you go on.
No, well, I think what it is that, you know, people have done things before for the right reasons, and, you know, have been looked back on favourably in the history books. But, you know, and then some people do things as a result of a belief system, and they're quite obviously not heroes. You know, some would label them terrorists.
Yeah.
So
were you thinking of specific examples? Because, yeah, off the top of my head, I was just thinking of Nelson Mandela, for instance. That's an example of how, you know, not every insurrectionary act is ethically wrong. Obviously, that was you know, that was the example that I have for that one. Yeah, because, you know, had things gone differently, would we look back at Nelson Mandela the same way? Well, the interesting thing is, Mike, because, like you say, what was so wrong, what was so just gobsmackingly obviously wrong about the insurrection at Capitol Hill, you know, the reason why it's a black and white, it was completely wrong, is because it was based on lies. This is the problem. Mandela's fight was based on a truth, which was the white oppressors were oppressing the blacks.
Undeniable. But in these people's minds, that wasn't based on lies. It's what they were basing their actions on was as good as fact as anyone else's version of the truth. They have their own.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, Mike. Because we've got lots to get through, let me just mention a few other things then. What do you think of this? Derek Evans, who was a West Virginia state lawmaker, has now been arrested and charged with entering restricted federal property, and then was forced to resign. Did you see this? He filmed himself. Well, not his face. He filmed as he was entering the building with the mob, basically cheerleading as he went in, and he identified himself on camera. I mean, I get that what you're saying, that a lot of the others, you know, could some of them might even be described as vulnerable people, like their head state was so screwed. This is a guy who was elected, and he's thought it was a great idea.
Well, normally I would say, you know, somebody like that must have, you know, certainly an above average level of intelligence. They must have something about them. But what I would say is, look who they elected as their president. So, does the fact that he's an elected member of anything mean anything anymore?
I get what you're saying. You're saying the office has been debased. Like it's been proven that actually these people aren't a cut above.
Quite clearly, fucking anyone can get. It's who you know, isn't it? Not what you.
Definitely. So that's a guy who was literally a lawmaker himself. By identifying himself, he's literally incriminated himself. He's now been arrested. He's obviously had to resign his position. So he's ruined his career. Then you have, for instance, some of the pictures we saw earlier. Do you remember fascist Jamiroquai? So he was known as the QAnon shaman. You know, the guy who was wearing the furry horns and painted face. So, yeah. After, by the way, do you know what QAnon is? Have you heard about this conspiracy theory? So, I mean, I'm not going to go into it in detail because it's so ridiculous, but this is a conspiracy theory that people genuinely buy into, that the Democratic Party are secretly operating a cannibalistic child trafficking sex ring, and that Donald Trump was apparently going to expose it to the world and save them. Seriously.
What?
Yeah, that's the QAnon conspiracy theory. This is America. Do you remember we had the show on? We did the Late Night Large on cults. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And we said America is almost the #1 place anywhere on the planet for cults. And that's another example. You can throw any old shit into the air and you'll always get a welcome audience. That's the thing. So the QAnon shaman, he's obviously been arrested now. Do you remember the grinning buffoon who was stealing Nancy Pelosi's lectern?
Yeah.
That guy? Yeah, he's been arrested now. Doesn't look so happy in his mugshot. I'll tell you something really funny as well that I saw, Mike. Oh my God. See, you think it's been funny already? Someone, I don't think they were an official journalist. I think they were just someone who was interested outside in what was happening. So a couple were walking away from the building and the woman looked quite distressed. So a guy who's kind of filming, he walks over to them with a camera and he goes, "Oh, are you okay?" And she's like, no, what's happened? So I got maced. And like, you had mace sprayed at you? And she's like, yeah. It's like, what? Why did you have mace sprayed at you? We were trying to get into the building, and then they suddenly like they maced us, and so here's the funny thing. He then asks for her personal details. Not a blink. She gives her name, where she lives, and then he says, "So why were you trying to go into the building?" "It's a revolution," she said. That's the level of people you're dealing with. I mean, I don't know what this woman was thinking. Did she think a revolution was a computer game or something? If she genuinely thought it was a revolution, why is she crying about being maced? In a revolution, you have to take like gunshots, beatings. That's part of revolutions. It's amazing that you see these level of mentality.
Well, I mean, that would happen, but you wouldn't necessarily be happy about it still, would you?
No, I think it was because she kind of sounded a bit like, you know, the woman in the First World Problems meme. I got maced just because I wanted to break into a federal building. Did you see the video that Arnie put out, Arnold Schwarzenegger?
No, I've not seen his video.
No, he was very condemnatory, and he even related it to his childhood, because obviously he grew up in Austria, didn't he? And he was born not long after the Second World War ended. And he was, you know, he basically compared this incident to Kristallnacht. You know, one of the precursors to the Nazi seizing power. And, you know, there's more clout when it comes from someone like Arnie, who actually does come from Austria. And he actually relayed quite a personal anecdote about his father, which I thought was quite touching. Arnie said he'd never really talked about his dad before, but his dad was basically a drunk who used to beat his wife, and I think sometimes Arnie. And Arnie actually said that he didn't 100% blame him. Huh? Well, exactly, yeah. But I think Arnie said he didn't entirely blame his dad because of the circumstances, because his dad, the shame and the guilt his dad felt for kind of being involved with the kind of Nazi movement around Austria. Like, obviously he wasn't like an SS guard or anything, but I think he'd been involved in part of the Nazi occupation, and the shame and the guilt had obviously driven him to drink and self-loathing and whatever else. So it was a really personal thing, and it was very cool to hear Arnie like have his take and basically say, like, you know, you can't get away with this. These people need to be. So okay, we've kind of gone through what happened, who was involved, these kind of things, Mike. These were the people who were directly involved. What about the secondary issues around here? So first of all, do you think there are questions to be asked about how the hell were these people allowed in the building?
I mean, those questions would surely have been asked. Yeah.
Okay, let me be more specific.
Okay.
So there was at least one video of some policemen moving the barriers aside so the protesters can move through. There was at least one shot of a police officer taking a selfie with one of the rioters. So my question to you is, do you think there was police? I'm not saying all of them, because one of them lost their life fighting against them. And in fact, there was also a video of an incredibly smart thinking black cop. I don't know if you saw this. Somebody had got footage of it. Basically, this black cop who was on his own, he was being chased up the stairs by some of these rioters. And, you know, because he's black, it assumes another significance. So these white protesters are chasing this black cop up the stairs. And there's a moment where he gets to the top of the stairs, and on the left, there's the Senate room where basically all the representatives are, where you do not want the rioters to get anywhere near it. And then to the right is kind of off down the corridor. And as the black cop gets up the stairs, he looks over to the left briefly to kind of see if there's anyone there, and it's empty. And then he looks to the right, and then the rioter, gets to the top of the stairs to confront the cop. And I believe the rioter looks over to the left as well, to where, you know, the forbidden area. And I think the cop reacted by pushing him in the chest and then running to the right. So he deliberately goaded him and led him away from the door. So I'm sorry I didn't take a note of his name, but I think he may get some kind of award for bravery for that, because that was very quick thinking. So that cop, obviously, and the cop who sacrificed his life, they were obviously doing their job to the best of their ability. But there's a big question mark, isn't there, about other police collusion or even actively helping the rioters?
Well, look, when you moving the opening the fences or whatever for them and taking selfies with them, I think is a little bit hard to argue against that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was my...
It's literally fucking there for you to see. So,
I mean,
to what level and, to what extent and where exactly that came from and how high up that goes or whatever, we'll probably never know the truth. But,
well, does it not? It plugs into something deeper that we already know, doesn't it, Mike? Because it's been proven by the Black Lives Matter protest, particularly, that there are problems within the police force. That some police force are white supremacists, or they do believe that black people are fairer targets. That they're more dangerous and you know they have a license to kill. So we know that. We know there's a massive institutional racism problem with American policing. But particularly, like, look at the copper that died. He was a big Trump fan. Now, he clearly did his duty. There's no suggestion that he was in league with them at all. But supporting Trump, I would argue that's a case for, like, what's going on here? Because this isn't supporting the Republican Party, so anyone can support any political party. But Trump, quite obviously, for a while now, has been white supremacist and with very fascist leanings. And for law enforcement to support that, you know, we've seen what happens when strongmen leaders get significant support in the police and the military. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. Look. Yeah. But what are you suggesting? That
I'm just
there shouldn't be any Trump supporters in the police?
I mean, he should never have been a president, should he? Really? I mean, that's where the problems come.
Well, that's where it originates. Yeah, well, actually, it doesn't. It goes back further, but yeah, that's the main issue. Is that for some reason, and listen, and I'm going to sound like I have another dig at the Americans in general, but and we're not that much better. But for some reason, saw fit to elect Donald Trump to be arguably the most powerful man on the planet.
Okay.
If you're going to do that, then you reap what you sow. Don't you?
Very true, Mike. So that I was going to say that surely there's questions to answer for the police, and I'm sure there will be an investigation. The other thing, of course, that came out, Mike, was the National Guard was not called in, I think, until about 3 hours into the siege. Now, there were question marks because I think initially people were talking about, well, who has the power to call the National Guard in? And it is obviously initially the president. And the story that came out is they were delayed for ages because presumably the president didn't give it the sign off. And the person who eventually called in the National Guard, despite Trump claiming it was him, was actually Mike Pence. So there's obviously got to be massive question marks over that as well. Because if the president has refused to send in the National Guard, that's massively problematic, isn't it?
Look, there'll be question marks over it, but there'll be, I can't think of the right way of putting it. There will be question marks, but they're not really necessary, are they? We know.
Yes, I know.
That Donald Trump will have deliberately not called in the National Guard, and we know why.
Very true. Okay. More things that
whether they can prove that, in whatever investigations are to come.
Yeah.
Time will tell. But
Mike,
yeah.
who do you how much blame do you put on elected officials that supported this narrative of Trump the election was stolen from him? How much do you think they're responsible for what happened?
I think they must take their share of the blame. How big that share is, fairly substantial. But what I don't want to do is take anything away from the fact that ultimately this is on Donald Trump.
Yeah. So let me try and explain.
I don't want to pass any of the blame that people would have otherwise attributed to him. I don't want to take any of that away.
The buck stops with him.
Yeah. They have a, and it depends, because are they just as brainwashed, or are they just weak?
Okay, well let me say this.
Following their leader because that's what they do, regardless of what they're being told or how they're being told. They will just stick by him because he's the president. Or
yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
So they're just weak. So not fit for purpose, or.
So two in particular, though, Mike. Two in particular that are being talked about a lot in America at the minute. So I know what you're saying. There are a lot of Republicans who join it in the pantomime because they want people, they want their fans and their voters to know they're fighting it to the hill. But by the time the riot happened, would you argue that no one anymore should be supporting the farce that was the election got stolen with no evidence? Would you not argue that that's a sensible way forward when you've just had a siege on the Capitol?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know where you're going, but yeah, of course.
Yeah. So
I mean, it shouldn't have been a thing in the first fucking place, should it? But now, definitely. I mean, you've got to draw a fucking line in the sand and go, do you know what? This has gone far enough.
So there's two senators I'm thinking about, Mike, particularly, and they've been talked about a lot in America, Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley. So basically these two senators, the reason why people think they should resign is that even after, like literally just after they'd cleared everything and they continued the process of ratifying the new president, after the chaos, Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz continued to imply that there were questions to be answered about the legitimacy of the election. Now, cynics have looked at that and said they are blatantly positioning themselves to be the next Donald Trump with their base, and also promoting the idea that democracy doesn't really matter. What do you think about that? Do you think there's something to be worried about in 4 years' time, either of them?
Do I think there's something to be worried about? I do a little bit.
A smarter version of Donald Trump, effectively.
Yeah, I do a little bit.
Mm.
What I would hope, and you know, and it is, and we mentioned it a lot recently because you fucking have to have some, and it is just hope though, is that enough of the population will be enlightened to maybe to things that they weren't before. So the fact that Trump lost is a sign. You know, you could choose to take it as one, and you know all the things that have happened since then just add further fuel. The sheer embarrassment that has been America, and a lot of Americans, the majority of Americans have been feeling that embarrassment. The country that they're so proud of, that they love and care for so much, they're ashamed of. That you would hope that that has touched enough people to prevent a Trump-like event again for at least the foreseeable future.
What do you think needs to what do you think needs to happen to Trump? Do you think it's urgent to remove him from power, like immediately?
It's urgent to remove him from power the fucking second he got it.
Fair enough. Another thing, Mike, because I've actually heard this said in America, which is unusual because I know a lot of people say it in this country. How much blame do you put on Rupert Murdoch?
Who's been saying that in this country? You?
As you well know, there's a lot of people who understand his malignant influence.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, for anyone who doesn't realise what I mean by that. So Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News in America, and I believe a lot of other outlets in America. He also dominates the news scene in this country and is about to launch basically a Fox News UK in this country. So we have probably our own Capitol Hill to look forward to in a few years. But in terms of Rupert Murdoch's influence, if you don't know about this, basically Fox News, you must have seen it. It effectively just spreads misinformation and lies. It exists to whip people's hysteria up about some imagined enemies, you know, leftists, liberals, Muslims, QAnon conspiracies. It will propagate whatever it thinks it takes to whip up usually angry white men to support the Republican Party, because the Republican Party cuts taxes for people like Rupert Murdoch. Now, what I mean is Rupert Murdoch was only able to do that because under Ronald Reagan, there was an FCC judgment, I believe, that required all news programming to be balanced and fair in its reporting. So the idea was you had to be generally truthful. You know, the news that you presented had to be truthful. And even if you presented it with a slant, you had to try and balance it out to give accurate reporting. Now, what Ronald Reagan did is he repealed that FCC guideline, which meant that Fox News could launch itself with news as entertainment. In other words, news didn't have to be rooted in accuracy at all. So that's how Fox News got to be how it is, just to give you the background.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue not just Fox News, is it? But
no, but Fox News is the archetype. That's who set the standard.
Yeah, and look, Rupert Murdoch undoubtedly has his share of the blame as well. You know, as with nearly everything that spread that we know to be bullshit, certainly in print media anyway, as well as you know, your Fox News type shit. It's he enables this stuff for you know, as you so succinctly put, for his own benefit. Yeah, and let's not butter it up. That is what it is. It's always been. Mm-hmm. Rupert Murdoch isn't new. He's not news to anyone. Or he shouldn't be. He's not new. This isn't something that's just happened now and just happened for Trump. It's been happening for years and years and years. So yeah, does he deserve to shoulder some of the blame for this, as well as fucking countless other things over the years? Yeah, but I maintain that ultimately the buck stops in one place.
Yeah, no.
So, you know, do I think that, you know, do I think that Rupert Murdoch's a bellend? Yes, if that's what you're asking me. Do I think that, you know, he played a part in whipping up this whole fucking shitstorm of bullshit? Obviously.
What about Mark Zuckerberg? Do you think Mark Zuckerberg has anything to answer? Allowing Facebook to
very, very different, isn't it? I think I see what you're saying. So, not, you know, Murdoch deliberately,
yeah,
spreads misinformation and whatever, for his own personal good. You're saying Zuckerberg
turned a blind eye to misinformation and conspiracy theories, and yeah.
Turned a blind eye is, I don't know. The thing is, I don't know as much about Zuckerberg as I do Murdoch. He's not been about as long. You know, okay, he's been around long enough now, but you know, it's no secret he's a very wealthy man.
Did you hear what Sacha Baron Cohen said about Mark Zuckerberg? Did you hear that?
No. Yes. What did he say?
Sacha Baron Cohen essentially accused Zuckerberg. He said, "Oh, if Facebook was around during the 1930s, he would effectively have been allowing people to promote, you know, the final solution and things like that."
I don't know. That's a bit harsh.
No, I mean, he was using a slightly extreme point, but what he was saying is because Mark Zuckerberg has had to answer questions from senators and other representatives before, and what he's always said is like he's tried to say about this laissez-faire attitude, where it's like we believe in like a utopia of free speech, where, you know, anyone can say what they want all the time. The problem is that was bullshit, because what Facebook did was it allowed people to pay them lots of money to spread misinformation. So that wasn't the same as allowing everyone the same voice.
Yeah, well, look, it's just another forum whereby, you know, people can buy.
Hijack the platform for their ends.
Yeah, can buy the platform to spread what they see fit. In that respect, it's no different to any other form of media. But
yeah.
But do I think that Zuckerberg has some sort of Trump-driven agenda? No.
No, I'd probably agree with you. I think Zuckerberg is just motivated by his own ego and money. I don't think he's necessarily someone who supports Trump's agenda at all. I think people offer him a lot of money and he finds it very hard to turn down. So he constructs this elaborate idea of, oh, we're a utopian platform where everyone can say whatever they like and we won't censor anything. When in reality, it's like, yeah, right. So, I mean, to give you an example,
I think it's difficult because, and I'm not condemning. Look, everyone would have nothing but their own opinions spread on all forms of media. If they felt that passionately about them, their beliefs are right, their way of thinking is right, etc., etc. Given the opportunity, and okay, maybe not strictly true, but I'm sure you would sway things one way, present certain information and argument to people if you had to say over what was shown and what wasn't shown. You would certainly try to influence things.
I'd like to think I'd be ethical. I'd like to think I'd be ethical. I wouldn't allow outright lies and misinformation.
I undoubtedly think that you would be more ethical, but you would push your own agenda.
I think it's natural to lean a certain way and be more responsive to certain things. I'm not arguing that. The argument from Mark Zuckerberg is he's effectively allowed elections to be won with lies and misinformation, and that the argument was he was quite happy to do that, even in the case of let's say Brexit and Trump. They were hugely divisive movements.
Look, do I think it's okay or morally right for him to take money to enable people to spread lies and bullshit? No. But, I mean, it would be incredibly difficult, and I would actually probably say nigh impossible to filter it all.
I agree with what you're saying, Mike.
And where do you draw the line?
You're getting me wrong if you think this is a left-right thing. It's about misinformation and lies.
Yeah. What I mean is, where do you draw the line as well? So what? Everything must be fact-checked before...
No, not necessarily everything. You basically judge it by if it is a political story or promotion, it should be fact-checked. And
but
also, you should.
Again, where do you draw the line? You can take an article about fucking anything, and it can have some form of.
Okay, I think what they said was, if it's a political campaign ad, it must be fact-checked, and if it's found to be false, it won't be run. So that's a good starting point. So, in other words, if you are running for office, you must tell the truth and not mislead people deliberately. And, if it's not an outright lie, but it's misleading, maybe you could have a little, like Twitter does, put a line underneath it saying some aspects of this maybe, maybe up for debate kind of thing. Anyway, we've gone off on a tangent somewhere. I see what you're saying. So, I mean, you're probably quite similar to me in blaming Zuckerberg and Murdoch. I think they have their fair share of the blame, but ultimately, like you say, the cartoon demagogue is the one who the buck stops with here. The other thing, Mike, before we go, because I think that was a good debate, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more debate on that in future weeks, maybe not on Lockdown Large unless there's massive developments. Just to go back to the UK, the only big news I heard, Mike, other than the fact that things are really shit, like the case numbers are still through the roof, hospitals are on a breaking point, people apparently are not behaving as well as they did during the first lockdown, police are being heavy-handed. But the big news is, what do you think about this then, Mike? Just a quick comment. Where are we? Almost like 10, 11 months into this pandemic, and the UK has finally demanded that people coming into the country need to show a negative COVID test.
I would say that's part of the course. for us and our response. Late to the party.
Very good. Late to the party.
Always. And and we'll cite things like, well, we started vaccinating people first, as like,
Yeah.
no, look how proactive we've been. Come on.
Yeah, it's an embarrassment. I mean, I think I've heard people trying to explain it, and it's just like there's no explanation. It's unbelievable for a party that's obsessed with controlling borders that has taken about 10 months to happen. Just anyway, so that's the situation in the UK. Please be careful, people, because we are in dire straits at the moment. It's not looking good at all. We have to stay safe. Keep washing your hands. Keep your distance. Don't be a twat and walk into stores when you're not wearing a mask. Just don't be a cunt for a few weeks, please.
Wash your finger for the minger.
Yeah, what Mike said. Well, there we go. There we go. That's Late Night Large for this week. It was a fun debate on the Yankee Doodle dipshits, and it'll be interesting to see. I will be really fascinated to see what happens to Trump when he leaves office. I mean, whether he's forced out of office, you know my opinion. I think you have to send a message. Like I'm not saying it's because, oh boy, Donald Trump's so horrible. It's because if someone behaves in a fascist way and literally instigates a coup attempt, you have to crack down on them personally as well as their supporters to say this will not be tolerated. Because otherwise you will get a smarter version of Trump. It's like somebody said that the biggest drawback that Trump had while he was in government was he's really fucking stupid. He doesn't have a brain in his head. Like if he had any kind of smarts at all, any intelligence, he could have done so much more damage and potentially won the election. Anyway, obviously we all give our best wishes. Not going to say prayers because that's America's deal, but best wishes to America. Feel bad for all the people who have to tolerate this. Let's hope you get your act together and throw Trump in the slammer, hopefully. But unless Mike has anything to add, Mike?
Just the usual. I would say make sure you hit like, you subscribe. Let us know what you think about anything we've said. How much blame do you think is on Zuckerberg's shoulders in comparison to Murdoch's? More? Less? Do you think Aaron's a cunt? Let us know. I have a few opinions of my own on that, and I'd be happy to discuss it with any of you. So,
yeah, who's the biggest bellend, Trump or Mike? So yeah, particularly if you're American. Hey, if you're an American who's watching this and you're ashamed of your country, please let us know below what you think. Love to hear from you. If you're a Trump fan, if you're a Trump fan, and by the way, sorry, something else I forgot to mention before we go, Mike, there was a straw poll of Republican voters apparently. And do you know that it suggested 45% of Republican voters had no issue with what happened at Capitol Hill?
45%?
45%. So that suggests...
Now I'm more worried again.
That suggests there is a much deeper problem in America than will be resolved by getting rid of Trump. So we wish you all the best, America. Please let us know, if you disagree or agree with what we said. Click the subscribe and the little bell, and we will return next week, I imagine. Until then, please look after each other and stay safe. Peace out.